and welcome back to Everyday Elevations, the podcast where we transform ordinary moments into extraordinary outcomes. So today I'm very excited for our guests. Today we have Sandra Possing, and Sandra is an ICF professionally certified coach. She's the podcast host of Oh Hi Self. She's a speaker and an entrepreneur. So through her group coaching programs, social media, and speaking engagements, Sandra inspires, empowers, and challenges people to create their versions of an extraordinary life. So with that, I'd love to just get, besides what I already gave you for a background, I'd love to let the listeners hear a little bit more about you, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this stuff. I'm like, background, I'm like, had I known at the time, like I would have identified it much younger, but I think I was always just a personal development junkie. You know, like it took me a long time to figure out that this work is something that you could do as a career. And I kind of like bumbled around and did a lot of other random stuff along the way before I got there. But now it's just fun when you look back at your life and a bunch of things that seemed so random at the time, afterwards you can connect the dots and you can just see like, oh my gosh, it actually all, like it really makes sense. I think about, so I was born in, just quick backstory, I was born in Sweden. I have a Danish mom and a Swedish dad. So grew up there grew up there until age 5 and then moved to Los Angeles and grew up there with a step family and kind of went back and forth my whole life to visit family. And so I, right off the get-go, had like these 2 identities. That makes me sound like a secret agent, but it was more just like, I was a kid traveling back and forth between families. But the cool part about that was, so a lot of the work I do now and with clients and just always with myself is identity work, which I think is so foundational to our personal development journeys. But for me, even just the beginning of like living these 2 lives was like the beginning of identity and just sitting with what that means and who we are. It's like every time I'm back home in Sweden, I feel so American, sometimes obnoxiously so, almost like apologize a little bit for how American I am. And then when I'm here in the US, I feel very European. I feel very Scandinavian. When I travel around the world, I feel kind of like, I don't know, the world citizen. But just having these 2 identities growing up and, speaking 2 languages and growing up with 2 very different cultures, I think was sort of a crucial beginning of my journey of just recognizing that like we are so much more than we think we are. Like there's parts of like for anyone who grew up speaking multiple languages or who maybe learned another language later on, you probably know that there's a phrase or a word that just it literally has no translation in the other language, and you try to translate and it just like doesn't quite land. And it's so the same with identity. I find is that like I am kind of a different version of myself when I'm there. And then I remember when I studied abroad in college and went to Italy for a year. And I discovered a third identity that I did not know I had inside of me, because if you know anything about Italian culture, it's basically the opposite of Swedish culture. Like in Italy, they talk with their hands and they're very loud and they're very animated, and personal space is like 6 centimeters, whereas personal space in Sweden is like 6 feet, and in Sweden, it's like culturally, we're very sort of polite and like proper, and we're like very reasonable. There's even a word in Swedish called lagom, which means like just the right amount. Whereas in Italy, everything is like full on in your face, So I go there for a year and I was like, I found myself suddenly up in people's faces, talking louder. My voice dropped lower. I was very animated. I was like, who is this sassy ass version of me that just came out of nowhere? And I was like, I like her. We're keeping her. So I think going through these kinds of experiences growing up, you recognize like we all have these different sides of us. And the more that we see those sides and kind of love and accept them, but then also decide like, who is it that we want to be? It just ends up becoming part of our self-awareness, I think, and part of our ability to decide, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? What do I want to do? Which really is like, I think that part of my journey informed so much of what I do now, which a lot of my work with clients is essentially helping them figure out, who the heck are you? What the heck do you actually really want? And then let's go create that for you. Like when I talk about creating an extraordinary life you love, for most people, it's like they've created a life kind of by default. And what I love doing is helping people untangle that and look at their actual genuine deep desires, not just the like, I did what I thought I was supposed to do and I'll I followed like the roadmap of what you're supposed to do to be a successful adult human of this species. And, for a lot of folks, they're like, I did everything right. And why does it suck? Or like, my life looks great on paper. Why am I not happy? So I think the identity piece is huge.
Yeah, I agree fully. I struggle with that for years. I still do a little bit to extend. I'm a little bit more clear on what I want. And that's because I've had great mentors and coaching, and the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I can butcher his name. Sorry if you ever listen to this episode and I butcher your name, my fault. But that book, I didn't get it at first. I read it like probably 4 times. I was like, I don't understand. I still don't know where to start. And then it took me a while to figure out I just got to figure out what really motivates me. Like, not even motivate, what drives me, because motivation can falter. What is my passion and why am I doing what I'm doing? And now it's honestly super easy. With having a newborn baby, I was like, oh, everything's like, this is clear cut. I know exactly what I'm doing with my life and why I'm doing every little thing, and probably overexerting myself at this point. Because I think as parents, you always want your kids to have a better life than what you had, and give them every opportunity available. And that's something that I'm just so excited to be able to do way too early in life, in the phase of the baby. He's only 4 months old. I don't have to stress that yet, but I want to make sure that we're set up for that type of success. And so that helped me create that clear cut why, that self-identity that you're talking about. So without that, I've been lost for decades.
Yeah. And I think for all of us, regardless of what our journey looks like, I think most of us get lost or re-lost, or we lose ourselves and then find ourselves again, probably multiple times, if not like hundreds of times throughout our lifetime, and I think the more that we can look at that as not some sort of like failure or something we're bad or wrong or broken in some way, but just see it as an opportunity for discovery. Some of the most profound, deep self-discovery happens when we hit some sort of rock bottom, or when we get so lost that we just are so exasperated that we're just like, well, what do I have to lose? Let me just figure this out. And I think those opportunities, if we can get really curious and just be like, what is this about? What's here for me now? Or what's next? What feels real? I think one of my huge philosophies just in life, and certainly in my work, is that it's about living from the inside out, and it's about transformation from the inside out, because I think that's the exact opposite of what we're taught. I think that we're taught to live from the outside in. We're given, endless we're bombarded with information our entire lives about who we should be, how we should be, where we should work, who we should marry, what we should look like, not just in our own childhood conditioning and programming from probably very well-intentioned caretakers and adults, but, it's like they were just doing the best they could with what they had, and passing down all their own trauma and stuff unwittingly. So it's like, here we are, we've from ages 0 to 7, we're like these little sponges just soaking up everything around us energetically. And then we go to school, and then we get the media, and then we get peer pressure, and then we get all these things. So it's like we spend our whole lives being conditioned to think we're supposed to be XYZ, whatever it is, depending on our upbringing and our culture. And then hopefully at some point along the way, we can kind of wake up to the fact that, wait a minute, I don't have to be whatever that was. And societal expectations they're always going to be there. Media is always going to be there. But like, who am I if I'm not just following the blueprint that's been handed to me? And that's like, can be terrifying so many of my clients so I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And so I get a lot of people who are, really high achieving career folks, professionals, and they've created these amazing careers and amazing lives, like I was saying before, on paper. And then they get to me and they're like embarrassed, because they're like, Sandra, my life is amazing, but like, I'm not happy. What's wrong with me? I should be grateful. Like, I have nothing to complain about. Like, my life is so good, but something's missing, and that's when I know usually there's a disconnect between who they really are, their authenticity, their true essence, and what they've created, and sometimes like they end up needing to kind of break out of the mold and do something totally different. I mean, I've had people get divorced and quit their jobs and start businesses and write books and launch podcasts or move to a different country and stuff like that. But most of the time it's like tiny little tweaks. And most of the time it's just like untangling those little bits of like, this is who I thought I was supposed to be, but this is who I actually want to be. And sometimes it can be something as small as like discovering, like you were mentioning before, just discovering a passion that's been laying dormant, or discovering some purpose that maybe has always been there, but you're like, I just haven't been following this mission that I actually have. Or maybe it's a new thing. Like, you didn't even know you had this thing, and then you find it and then you start following it, and it like becomes this North Star guiding light thing, but it's something that's coming from the inside, hence the like transformations from the inside out. And the more that we can really dig into and find those things, like whatever that fire is that's inside of us, whether it's like, silly little things that are just unique to us. Like, everybody who knows me knows I'm obsessed with cats. And it's like, that's a dumb thing. I'm not here on this, earth to like save all the cats in the world or anything like that. It's just it's just a preference. I just love cats, but it's like, it's such a source of joy. And the more I honor that source, I have people sending me cat memes and cat videos all the time and stuff. And it's just like, it brings me joy. And it's also a connection point to other humans. So whether it's like a silly thing like that, or it's, you are on some huge mission to, I don't know, transform some industry or like solve world hunger or something. It could be anything in between, but it's like whatever it is for each of us that's meaningful. So important.
Oh, 100% agree. I learned just through a mentor of mine, Jesse Itzler, to really take account of what buckets that you're placing your time into. Figure out what buckets are important to you in life, and then go from there. Like, where are you putting your time? How is this getting you to your happiness? And how do you get to where you're truly happy and you understand that this is what life is all about? And that's very layman terms of what he goes over, like very loosely based off his conversation, to be clear. But it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, hyper successful people, struggle with that. It's because if they're so focused and driven on hitting that success, because we have these markers. I have a friend who, for whatever reason, has a couple $100 million dollar goal in his life. Doesn't know why it is other than some childhood goal. And that's what he's been pushing for. But he found that that's making him so unhappy in other areas of life. So he's starting to now realize that, hey, I was like, let me reevaluate what I'm focusing on and becoming a better version of myself, because I'm starting to understand who I am, who my identity is. And I've just went a little bit on a tangent there, but I just completely relate to what you're talking about, because there's so many people out there that struggle with that and don't actually, not that they don't, maybe they don't even understand how to put their life into buckets of areas. Like for me, my podcast is based off of the 8 buckets in life, 8 dimensions of well-being by Dr. Peggy Swarbrick. So for me, I knew that I was struggling with certain areas. And the reason why I wasn't happy and was lost and confused, because I'm so used to being in the great shape prior military. I was, like gung-ho G.I. Joe guy. And my finances at that time were good. I had, military's a pretty steady paying job. There's just little things that, as life kept changing around me, buckets started falling off. And I didn't know how to reprioritize and understand what was affecting what. And so that's why I love when you talk about identity, because I think people really, once you look inward and you understand that, hey, this is actually my priority, and find out why that's your priority. Because I think people write it down because it's the sexy thing to have out there. Like, oh, I want to use my friend as an example. I want to make $300 million. Why? What's that going to get you? Freedom of time. So will $1 million. So will $100,000. It depends what freedom of time looks like to you. And so that's, again, I'm going on a long tangent, but I love this topic of identity because I'm so relating to it, just with different friendship conversations and myself personally.
And bringing in the why can be really important. I think, like what you're saying about, you want this thing, but why do you want it? And that's a huge part of what I do with my clients, for example, on when I kind of go through different phases with them. We usually do a big identity phase, which is the like, who the F are you kind of phase, and like, what are your core values and your passions and your strengths and all that. And then we do a big desires phase, which is just like, what do you actually want? And in the beginning, they'll often list off all these things that they quote unquote want, but then I try to challenge them on those and be like, great, if they actually genuinely want something, I want to know that it's a genuine desire and I want to honor that. And then let's figure out how to move you in that direction. But so much of the time, the stuff that they identify in the beginning, it's like, great, you want this thing. Why do you want it? And either it's like, they don't know, like your friend, you're like, I don't know, it just sounds good, I guess. Or it's like I want to drive this kind of car. Great. Why? I don't know, that's what everybody else at my job drives. Like then they realize it's like an ego thing. They want to fit in, or, they want whatever it is that they want. That's like so much of it in the beginning. It's like keeping up with the Joneses. It's ego. It's like you want it because you think you want it because it's what you were told to want as a kid because it's what your parents wanted for you. So it's like, it's the thing that you want because you want to impress your parents' friends, or it's the thing that you want because you want to keep up with your friends or whatever it is. And once you start, there's like, what's that exercise? Like you ask why 5 times and you keep digging. But doing something like that with each individual desire is really illuminating, because if they don't have like a really compelling answer that feels authentic, it becomes obvious pretty quickly. And then they're explaining why they want something, and it's just like, it feels kind of hollow. It feels like kind of empty, like there's no resonance to it. Whereas once you find something that is a genuine desire, it feels so, I think our bodies are these amazing compasses. Like when I think about a desire that's like a should desire and a desire that's like a real deep, genuine desire, it feels complete. I almost get like tingles in my body just thinking about like what a real desire feels like. And oftentimes those are the desires that we haven't shared with people, because they're the desires that maybe we're embarrassed because it doesn't fit into the paradigm that we're living in with our family and friends, or, like somebody who's grown up, let's say in a kind of more, I don't know, conventional career-based circle where everyone is expected, you go to good school, you get a 9 to 5, you save for retirement, you do all the proper things, right? And then this person's like more of an artist or more of an entrepreneur, and they're terrified to even share that dream because nobody in their family would understand. Their friends wouldn't understand. Everybody's just like on the, finance track. Like, everyone's going to be a finance bro. What are you thinking? And this person's like, I want to create my own business based on art, question mark. And so when we start to actually entertain those deep desires, it's so vulnerable. It's so scary, especially if we think we might be rejected or judged for it. And so it's a really tender thing, which is why I think that oftentimes with these little baby dreams that we like haven't dared to say out loud yet, it can be really important. And just like a practical tip for listeners, if you have those dreams, be mindful of who you share them with. Like I'm all about when you feel really confident in a desire, absolutely scream it from the mountaintops if you want to. If you're just like, I'm owning the shit out of this and no matter what anybody thinks, I feel solid in it. But if it's a vulnerable dream and it's a little wobbly still and it feels fragile, don't share it yet with people who are going to just poop on your parade,
That's fair. So I'm kind of along that journey myself, actually. So like you mentioned coaching, it's something that I want to get into. And this is the first I've really talked about it besides like to my own coach. Just because it's one of those things where, as you said, people will poop on it. And no matter how much inner work a person does, we have an ego. So when someone starts telling you no, then self-doubt naturally creeps in. So I don't need that for when I'm trying to position myself in a better place in life. But if I told my fiance or my dad, blue collar worker, worked for railroad his whole entire life. His mom worked for railroad. My grandma and my grandpa, they worked for the railroad. So me saying, hey, I want to run a coaching program, they're like, what does that even mean?
Exactly. They don't have even like a context for it in their mind. And it's like, and then they're going to respond, maybe not with the best of intentions, but they're going to respond through their only lens of comprehending something like that. And to them, that means something. I don't understand it. It's probably weird. It's never going to work. Don't be crazy. I want you to do well and be safe. Like, don't be an idiot. Don't go do this weird new age thing that people, I don't even know what that means. It's probably some internet scam, right? And then it's like, but they don't have a context for it. They don't have the backstory of all the amazing potential and possibilities and like the beauty and the power of the coaching industry for those of us who are either in it or we know of it or we're familiar, and it's like, I think it's so important for us to remember that everyone is seeing the world, including whatever we're bringing to them, through their own lens. And all of our lenses are completely different. And even if somebody loves you and supports you, they might have such a different lens, like just a worldview and a different like belief system in their mind, that they can't help but project their own belief systems onto you. And their way of supporting you might be telling you that your idea is crazy and stupid because they genuinely believe that. And so they're going to project their own discomfort onto you, and it's just like, we can't let that be our guide, which is why I think, again, like the living from the inside out instead of the outside in, which is really hard in the beginning when you're used to living from the outside in. And when you're used to listening to all the external expectations and pressures, to find the strength to actually trust our own inner guidance is super hard. And that's why I think, like, to your point of having mentors and coaches and finding people, even if it's like, Tony Robbins on YouTube, like, it doesn't have to be people in real life. It could just be all the books we listen to, or all the, videos we watch, or teachers from afar who can get us like into that mindset of thinking differently and daring to cultivate these genuine desires and like vulnerable dreams instead of just letting them be, broken before we've even given them a chance to see the light of day.
I could not agree more. I love the way you're phrasing that is just so amazing to me, because I think we let too much external noise out there, not even just for almost everything we do, even from a young age at kids. Now we have social media, which makes it even worse because people expect it to be instant gratification. So that outside noise is even more unrealistic at that point because they see the picture perfect world. Then you have people like who are just so stuck on, I call it the American dream. So like my family, for the most part, they're supportive to like an extent, of course. Like they love you. They're like, hey, we're going to support you. We might not understand it, but we'll support you in things. And I feel like it's probably most families too. A good portion anyways, maybe not most. But it's just one of those things where you know that they're still second guessing what you're doing and you're not really getting the support you like when it comes down to it. And so it's so fascinating to me to think about other people's journeys and how they got past their own identity crisis and all these external noises. That's something that I still struggle with. I'm sure most people do.
Yeah, I think that one of the best gifts we can give ourselves is to find a way to be sort of building the inner work or the identity work into our day-to-day lives. Because if we're trying to, and to me, it's not about changing who you are because who you are isn't good enough. I think we're all always good enough all the time. And we get to grow and evolve if we want to, which hopefully we do, because I think life is about evolving and growing. But it's like, if we want to be, let's say, shifting our reality and designing I love the term lifestyle design, like designing our lifestyle to me means doing it intentionally, deciding what we want and then curating that, creating it, designing it, creating it, building it, manifesting it, versus just like living in whatever reality would happen to be handed to you, But so while we're trying to do that, and while we're maybe faced with external pressure or criticism or doubt or skepticism from well-meaning family and friends, it's like, what do we need to do to then stay the course? Like if this is like, let's say I've been on path A, which is like family, friends, conditioning, traditional stuff. And I want to go on path B. Let's say, like in your case, you want to start a coaching business. You want to do this new thing that people don't understand. So it's like, how do I stay the course? How do I feed myself like the soul food on a regular basis to stay inspired, to stay connected to my mission, my dreams, my purpose, whatever it may be? And I think there's a combination of things. I think something like consuming, like you mentioned, social media, right? If we consume social media unintentionally and mindlessly, it can cause a huge mental health crisis. We can go into so much comparison. We can get, sucked into all sorts of, that's a whole nother topic. But if we choose to use the tool, I think of social media as just a tool like anything else. If we use it mindfully, it can be an amazing tool. Like I'm pretty much unavailable for anything coming into, because I do use social media for my business and I also use it for entertainment. So I'm unavailable for anything coming into my feed that is not part of the reality I want to create. So if I see family or friends posting, a bunch of political stuff that I just don't want to I don't want to have it on my radar all day, I just unfollow, mute, whatever it is. It's like we can curate away everything that doesn't support, and family who don't understand what we're doing, like those of us who use social media for business, you can block family and you can just tell them like, I love you so much, but I use social media for work. And just the same way that I'm not going to come to your workplace and sit on your desk and stare at you while you have your meetings with your colleagues. I just would prefer to keep family and business separate. So I'm blocking you. Please don't take it personally. So it's like we can curate not only who sees our stuff, but what stuff we see. And like for me, social media, my Instagram, that's mostly what I use. It is like just this endless stream of inspiration. I mostly follow entrepreneurs or coaches or like thought leaders and people who are doing amazing work in the world, like these mission-driven, heart-centered people who are changing lives. And they're doing amazing work in the world, but they've also created amazing lives for themselves. So I try to intentionally follow people who have the life I want or who have the business I want, or there's something about what they believe about the world, how they think, how they live their lives is something I aspire to. So it's like Instagram is like a steady source of inspiration. It's full of expanders and people who are role modeling for me what's possible versus like, I don't know. I don't go on Twitter much, but I think a lot of people on Twitter, it's just this like, mud slinging, like terrible, like political ongoing fight of just like the worst, it's just trolling each other. Like I'm just unavailable for any of that to come into my mind space. So I think we can do, we can curate the content we consume, and then we can surround ourselves with people who are supportive, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's joining a mastermind, or it's joining a free community or Facebook group, or finding a local, some local, whoever that's people on a similar path. Or like I was saying before, just books and YouTube, for free. It doesn't have to be some high price thing. And the more we can stay in that mind space of like the content, the people I'm around, the environment. And then also to me, my favorite work, like I keep saying, is the identity piece of like, what if every day I have a commitment to myself and I'm doing my best to stay in integrity with this commitment of like, I'm doing my best to show up as the version of myself that I am working on becoming. Talk a lot about future self and like embodying your future self, stepping into your future self. And like, I'm very, very clear on who my future self is. She's still me. She's authentically me, but she's like the up-leveled across the board. Like in every category, she's just smarter, wiser, more calm, more confident, more successful, more whatever. And so she's just like a few steps ahead. And so if I can just like put on a hat, it's like putting on a, Halloween costume or something. Like every day I can work on, how do I show up as her? How do I think like her, talk like her, act like her? How do I carry I carry my body differently when I think of embodying my future self. And it's like, to me, that's one of the shortcuts to go from where we are to whatever it is that we want to create, to our goals and dreams. It's like collapsing time. And I think when we think about manifestation and those things, like embodying that future self is one of the best shortcuts in the world.
So with that, I haven't done that yet, but now I want to. That's definitely an amazing tip. So for people who struggle to find that future self or stay in that moment where they're basically becoming their future self, how do you get back to it? Like once you falter, how do you get somebody from being in that mindset of, oh, well, maybe I can't do this, back to, hey, this is who I am. This is like, here I am in the future. I have all this freedom of time, whatever it is that you're dreaming of as your version of yourself. I'm happy. I get to spend all this time with the kids, whatever. Like, how do you bring them back to it?
I think one of the easiest ways is to remember that as humans, we are inherently built to grow and learn. I think the best, like the fastest and easiest example is like so you have a 4-month-old, right? How old are kids when they learn to walk? Like a year and a half, something like that?
I'll tell you when he starts walking.
So exactly. Somewhere in the like between baby and toddler phase, but whatever that is, right? A baby starts walking. We don't expect them to like just get up and start like walking perfectly on balance right away. They go through so many iterations of falling and stumbling, and they're trying to learn, it's like, it's a learning phase. And it's the exact same thing with identity work. So if let's say I decide today for the first time ever, I'm going to work on embodying my future self. Okay, what does that look like? Number one, I have to figure out who she is. So I think step one is just a decision to do so. Step two is like clarifying who is this future version of myself. And like I was saying before, to me, she like carries herself differently. She's more confident. She's, accomplished. You can insert all your goals and dreams. Like, one of my goals is to be a 7-figure business. So she's 7-figure in revenue every year, like on repeat. This is what her life looks like. This is how she thinks. This is how she feels. This is how she dresses. This is how she carries herself. These are, this is the visibility she has in the PR world or whatever magazine, something like that. So I have all those things in mind. I have a clear picture. And then to me, it's like a process of getting your brain and your body on board on a regular basis. And that's such ongoing work, and I think just like learning to walk as a baby, say I start today, I might not remember it all for the rest of the week. And then, oh yeah, next Monday, I'm going to start again. So you just begin again. You keep beginning again until it becomes a habit. And sometimes you remember for like 1 second. Another time you remember for a whole hour. And you're like waltzing around, let's say your regular job or something. And you're like, nobody else needs to know, but you are showing up as your future self in a meeting, or like at dinner with friends or something. So you just do it as often as you can remember. And then every time you quote unquote fail, you just remember that that's part of the process. And then you begin again and you begin again. And sometimes you're going to be in a terrible mood and you're like, I'm not in the mood to be my future self right now, because my future self is like wise and calm and, mature and whatever. And right now I feel like being like a bratty toddler and having a tantrum. And I don't feel like being emotionally mature right now because, and that's fine too, because we're human, so you just let it go. and then you try again. And I think it's just those little moments. It's like compound interest. The more you do it, it adds up, but it's not just 1+1. It's like, it's the compound interest version, because each time it becomes more familiar and each time we get faster and faster. And then it's like, maybe you've gotten to a point where you can show up as your future self around your supportive friends and mentors. But then when you go back home to your parents or your extended family, and we go right back to like our, rebellious teenager mode. So it's going to be harder in certain situations. And then that becomes the next challenge, is showing up as your future self with the people that it's harder around, or for longer periods of time, or like stringing more and more of those moments together until it becomes to the point where you're kind of like, I am showing up as that version of myself most of the time. And then one day you're just like, oh, I just am her now.
Love it. Now, have you ever used any like reminder type tools or anything like that for these type of things? Because I know I use like little task reminders to pop up, like just little positive quotes of, hey, this is where you want to be, things like that. And it helps keep me in that mindset. Is that something you would recommend for people to try?
100%. Yeah, I'd say experiment and see what works for you, because we're all different. But some of the classic tricks are like change all your passwords to something that's could be a goal or a name that you have for this identity. I love like archetype work and character type work too, where the classic example is Beyonce. When she goes on stage, she becomes Sasha Fierce, or we could each choose like our pop star alter ego name or whatever. Like there's an exercise I learned in the coaching world a million years ago, where you choose this whole cast of characters and they become like kind of a virtual advisory board. My cast and crew had probably like 15 different characters on them. And each character is helpful in different situations, so we could have kind of characters or archetypes that we play with. We could have just one name that like is our, like if I think of just one name for my future self, she doesn't have a name. It's more like I think of just the concept of queen energy. She carries herself with just this like regal, calm queen energy. So that's like my shortcut. But reminders that are like recurring reminders that show up on your phone as little, like a little pop-up, or, classic old school sticky notes. You could have affirmations written on your bathroom mirror in whiteboard marker. I mean, there's so many different ways. That could be visual reminders, or it could be recording your own affirmations and listening to them. It could be listening to guided visualizations that are aligned with this future identity that you want to step into. So many creative tools out there, if we're willing to just experiment a little bit and see what works for us.
Awesome. Fantastic. And that kind of figured that was where we're going with that too, in terms of tools, because all of those I've used at some point in time and still use. I tried the mirror thing. That I could not get that to work for me. And you know what it is? It's because I'm a clean freak. So when I had something in a mirror, I just wanted to wipe it off. It just ate away. Yeah, I'm like, ah. But
yeah, and that's the thing I think with all these tools in the kind of self-help personal development world is a lot of folks are quick to look at it and just dismiss it right away because it's cheesy, or that's lame. Or you try something one time and you're like, it didn't work, and it's not that it didn't work. It didn't work for you that one time, so. But I think it's important to try things because, an example that makes me laugh is, so my husband and I, we have like the exact opposite taste when it comes to meditation, for example. So he, one of his favorite meditation teachers is, what's his name? Sam Harris, I think his name. He's got a whole app, and his style is like no music, just him talking very slowly. It's very like mindfulness-based meditation. It's like that kind of vibe, but with a male voice. Chris loves that. Like he loves that style. I listen to it for like a nanosecond and I'm just immediately bored. And I'm like, so just the whole thing is annoying to me. And then I'll listen to, I have a really hard time finding guided meditations that I like. The ones that I like are like, there's like tribal music in the background, or there's some sort of EDM house beat that's like pretty loud in the back. It basically is the kind of music you want to go to like ecstatic dance or to rave or something to. And then oftentimes the voice that's guiding the meditation is like I was listening to this one app called Maya, I think, for a while. And my favorite meditations on there was this Italian guy with a great Italian accent. And he would be like, I am empowered. You love yourself. And it was just like, it was pretty cheesy, but it was like my flavor of cheesy. And so I would listen to it and it would just put a smile on my face. And I was like, yeah, and I had Chris listen to a few minutes of it. And he was like, absolutely not. He was just like, I cannot even. He's like, this is so terrible. This would never relax me, So it's like, we're all so different. And I think it's really important that we just honor those differences and we find what it is that we like.
That's fair. No, that's great advice. So as soon as you mentioned the Italian guy, all I'm thinking when you mentioned the tone of voice, have you ever watched Dancing with the Stars? Bruno, that's exactly what I was picturing. Like
Exactly.
giving the talk. I'm like, oh man, I couldn't do that one. I'm like a happy medium between the two. I can't do just someone's voice. I will get bored, but I have to have music. So I found like people like Jay Shetty does meditation as well. He has his own Genius app, and people hear me reference Jay Shetty a lot because I'm a huge fan. But there's multiple other people who do it as well, but they just have that nice background music. I need the more like nature, because that's where my center is I'm very nature centric. That's what gets me back to where I need to be. So anytime I'm strung out, I just go, thankfully I'm in Colorado, so I can just go to the mountains, or hear the river creeks while hiking. It's fantastic. But that's like the beats I need to have when I'm going. And like cool, calm, collective voice. If I had Bruno chatting, I'd be like, ooh, I was like, I don't know if I can meditate right now. I want to hear you talk, but I don't know if I'll be able to meditate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of funny.
Exactly. No, we're all so different. And it just, the more that we honor, and like the more we honor those parts of us, to me, those are the things that like, it makes us light up, like one of the classic transformations I see in my clients, I usually work with people for 6 months or more. And it's like the version of them that shows up at the very beginning, they're great. They're a lovely human. They're, whatever they are. And then over time, it's like, I start to see them. A lot of it is because people come into the container, often pretty stressed or overwhelmed, or a lot of them are very focused on work and adulting and all the usual stuff. And they've kind of forgotten the parts of themselves that is like the childlike joy, wonder, play, honoring passions, all that stuff is like on the back burner. So they're just lifing and adulting and parenting and working and all that kind of stuff. And they show up as this like rigid, tight, kind of balled up version of themselves. And then over time, it's like they start to just, their body relaxes. And I swear it's like their soul relaxes too. And it's like a light comes back on their eyes, back in their eyes. And we start to do little, exercises and things where they find those things, those playful things. They're like a perfect example. I was doing a future self exercise with a client the other day. And we were talking about like, what is this future self's like? What's her color palette? What's her style? Does she have like, if she was a business, does she have like a color palette or a brand or something? And my client just immediately lit up like a light bulb, and she yelled yellow, like to my face. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh my God, yellow. And then she rattled off all these reasons why yellow was so important and how she has all the, and I was just like, the version of her that I saw that day, I was like, that's what I want. This is why we're here. All the other like important professional goals and development, whatever, all that stuff aside, it's like watching the light come back on in a human. That's what this is about to me. And I don't think the light comes back on in us if we're just doing what we think we're supposed to do. If we're parenting the way we think we're supposed to parent and working the way we think we're supposed to work, it's like those little things, like even just something as stupid sounding as like testing out different kinds of meditation until you find the one that where you're like, yeah, like I can get down with this. And this gets me excited. We're the kind of like dancing is one of my huge passions. And even just, I turned on like a 4-minute kind of cheesy beginner dance video the other day and was legit crying the whole time. I'm just dancing here by myself in my office to this silly like fitness video. But I was like, that's what I'm talking about, because it's this thing in me that is it wants to come out. And I don't need to be on Dancing with the Stars to honor it. I don't need to go dancing every night of the week to honor it, but I have to honor it because otherwise that part of me grows dim. And then I'm not being like my full self. So I think we need to find those little ways to just turn up the dial on these different parts of ourselves, whatever it may be. And it takes exploration, it takes a lot of trial and error. And it takes like carving out some time and space to actually do those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm big on dance too. And I'm not a great dancer, but I love being around dance and I love watching it. Have you ever seen any videos by Fiction or Amy Marie Gardner?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to send you an email with their names again. Check them out. They're just amazing people. And like Fiction, he moves his body in ways that a human should not be able to move. He was on, I think, So You Think You Can Dance was the name of his show. Actually
sounds familiar. Yeah. We saw somebody in an airport one time that somebody in my group was like, that's a person who was on I almost want to say that the name Fiction sounds familiar. So I wonder if maybe that was who we saw.
It's quite possible. But yeah, I would check those out because they're so much fun to watch, because he dances so uniquely and beautifully with the songs, and every song has some special meaning to him. It's not just a song to be a song. That's kind of why like I gravitated towards watching him, and same with like Amy Marie Gardner. They just dance with like their whole souls. It's fantastic to see. So again, another tangent, but it is what it is.
And the whole, just to highlight what you said about like dancing with your whole soul, I think that's a metaphor for how I think that I hate the word should, but like how we can all benefit from living our lives is like, what does your day-to-day life look like if you are freaking dancing with your whole soul, you know? Like, and so you mentioned your baby. I'm 12 weeks pregnant as of today. So my husband and I are preparing for that whole journey. And, a lot of like, we've lived this. We're both entrepreneurs. We're both digital nomads. We're like free stuff, freedom, everything. Obviously that's going to look different now in a few months. And so we're talking a lot about like, how do we, because we don't want to do parenting the way that we see most people do parenting. Nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't work for us. And so we're trying to figure out like, what is our unique way of approaching this, and what will our freedom lifestyle look like when there's three of us? And just, and to me, like that sentence of dancing with your whole soul, like that's a perfect way to articulate what I want our life to look like with the baby. I want to continue dancing with my whole soul, with my husband and my baby in whatever way we can. That is like unique to, obviously it's not just me anymore. So it's authentic to me, but it's also authentic to our little family unit. And what does that look like? Which will take some experimentation. It'll take some trial and error. And obviously there will be some compromises, but it's like, I so believe that when we each individually come alive, that's like not only the best gift to ourselves and our soul, but to everyone around us too. Like the world needs people who have come alive, who are lit up, who are dancing with their whole soul.
And here's what I'm going to tell you. Sorry, spoiler alert, but once your baby comes into your life, it's going to be such a fun journey for you because of the fact that you get to see life through the eyes of a child again. And I didn't understand it until like I had friends who told me this and like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, sure, like makes sense, but it didn't make sense. But like I've realized now that my child's getting more and more animated and more mobile, maybe not more and more mobile, but definitely more aware of everything. Like he'll look at a fan as if though it's the coolest thing on earth. And like, you're like, why are you still staring at that? Like he has this amazing wonder. And I'm so excited for that journey for myself. And like, I'm excited for that for you as well, because you mentioned the fact that we lose that little bit of childhood wonder and spark because life just, we're raised to be put into a box, even though we shouldn't be. That's just the way our society is. And so I'm very excited for you, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So excited for you to go on that journey and see what I'm talking about, because it's easy to understand, but to truly understand is once you have that baby, you're going to be like, oh, I know what he's talking. You're going to send me an email like, I know what you're talking about now, because I didn't fully grasp it. And it's, yeah. Whew. And I'm so excited for all the little things you get to do again. Think about all the childhood things that we missed out on or didn't take a risk with or whatever. You get to, not that you want to live your life again through your child by any means. That's probably not good parenting. So if you're taking that as a tip, please don't. But it's fun to be able to see, my nieces and nephews, for instance, I get to see them grow up and the things they're doing and the things they're enjoying. I'm like, wow. It's like, I remember this period of my life to an extent. I mean, they're 5, so I don't remember all that, but like you see these things, you're going to get to go on that journey too. So I'm excited for you. Again, I'm the king of tangents, but I just felt like it was like you mentioned that. I was like, oh, we mentioned the just missing out on the childhood spark. Like that's just something so incredible. But
it's a huge opportunity, I think, to reconnect to that part of ourselves, which I think we can all benefit from. And it's a chance to like relearn how to be present. Mm-hmm. So many of us spend so much of our time in the future or the past, and the more that we can cultivate the ability to be like super, super, super freaking present as much as possible, and also to find the little moments of joy in our day-to-day life. Like, yes, pursue the big, dreams and go on the vacations that bring you joy and that kind of stuff too. And how do we find the little moments of joy in our day-to-day life that just make Like I want everyone's Monday to be, I want everyone to wake up on Monday so stoked that it's Monday, not to have the Sunday scaries and then wake up dreading Monday, which is unfortunately most of the world, you know? So bringing that wonder back for sure.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. So we're getting ready to wrap up here, but I always like to end things with a couple questions. And this is one of my favorite ones because it's just, I get unique answers every time. So if you had any superpower, what would you say your superpower is or you'd want to have?
I'll answer that in two parts. I would say the superpower that I do have that I feel very confident in is a very consistent ability to make people feel seen and heard and validated and like they matter. And that feels like a superpower because I feel like it's pretty rare. And I feel like a lot of our communication just as a culture is not great. And one of the most common complaints I hear from people is that they don't feel validated, or they're maybe not using those words, but reading between the lines, that's the root of it. They don't feel validated by their partner, by their boss, by their friends, and so I think just that is a huge gift. And it's one of the, I think part of my purpose is just to make more people understand that they matter, you know, and that they're worthy and like help them feel seen in our moments of connection. So that's current superpower. If I could choose any superpower, I hate to be like super trite, but I feel like the idea of being able to fly sounds so great. Just like one of my favorite animals, which so many people hate, is a seagull. And to me, it's like I grew up near the ocean in LA, and the sound of seagulls, like I love being near the beach, near the water, and the sound of seagulls to me represents like freedom and ocean breeze and salt water and that like wildness. And when I think of putting myself in the body of a seagull or whatever other flying creature and just being able to, that feeling of just like soaring and floating just sounds so, I mean, it's like I love if I go to an amusement park, those rides that are like a swing that just go around in a circle. One of my favorites. It's like the one that the kids go on, but I could just go on that thing for hours, you know, just that feeling of weightlessness and lightness and like a perspective of being really high up and seeing, I say my spirit animal is a giraffe because I'm also really tall and I have a long neck and I kind of look like a giraffe, but but just that perspective, like a bird's eye view, being able to be up high and look at the big picture is really appealing to me. So I think, yeah, just float around, fly around like free as a bird.
Love it. It makes sense. I'm more of a teleportation guy, so I can go anywhere I want. But like mentioning the flight, that makes perfect sense to me, especially being able to get to see from a different perspective and just the freedom of it. Yeah. And I get the seagulls. If you said pigeons, we'd have a different conversation. But seagulls, because they are serene, it does make you think of the beach no matter what, even though I don't want them right by me while I'm sitting on the beach.
They want your food.
Yeah. They just want to annoy me. But other than that, yeah, I 100% agree with that. I can see where you're coming from, I should say. Now, next question. And really the final question. If you had any quote that would be put on your epitaph, so your gravestone, what would that quote be that you would live by, that you want people to know you by?
Oh man, it's like a tie between a bunch of different ones, but I think probably the one that comes to mind most often that I use with clients is Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning. And I usually butcher it, but it's something like, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our ability to choose. And in that choice lies our freedom, or it's something like that. And to me, that's just such a useful reminder about life, because I think most of us are reacting to life too quickly. You know, we react to things, we react defensively, we react instinctively. And most of us don't have those mindfulness kinds of practices that help us slow things down. And if we could just drive a little, there's also a great book called The Wedge, which talks about this. It's like we drive a wedge in between, into that space between whatever the stimulus is and whatever our response is. And it could be like 1 second, but that 1 second allows us to go from amygdala to prefrontal cortex. It allows us to go from like whatever my stress response is, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, to just actually using my more developed human brain and being like, how do I want to respond to this? And I think that can change everything.
Okay. So no one's used that quote before. And I've heard it, but now I gotta go Google that and write it down, because that's a quote that I definitely want to incorporate into my life because that is
one.
incredible. Yeah, it's a great one. My favorite quote is, again, a lot of my quotes come from like two specific people, a lot of my things, because they're two big people I look up to. Jesse Itzler, he's all about being present. And so he says, be where your feet are. And I didn't understand it for the longest time. And then I started realizing that I was always like daydreaming or about the future or worrying about the past. Like where did I go wrong? Where did I make mistakes from at? And how could I have changed where my current outcome is? And then I realized it doesn't matter. It's already happened. And the future hasn't happened yet. So I can shape it however I want. I just have to be here right now. And so that's why I love that quote. That's something that's huge to me. But yeah. He has a lot of gems. If you haven't heard of him, definitely check him out on YouTube. He has some really cool speeches. He does a happiness meter speech at a TEDx talk, and it's phenomenal. That was one of my first experiences of coming across him. And then, haven't been following him ever since that point. But yeah, so with that, I want our listeners all have an opportunity to reach out to you and follow all your information, social media. So where can they find you at?
Yeah, so a couple different places. One is a little free gift that I have that I love to offer, which is all about identity. It's a little bit more specifically geared towards women, but it's also applicable to anyone. It's called Making You Magnetic, and it can be found at makingyouMagnetic.com. And it's a really easy to consume 3-episode pop-up podcast. So it's just 3 short 20-minute episodes. And to me, it's exactly this work of stepping into your future self, and specifically stepping into your wealthy future self. So I do a lot of work on manifestation and money mindset, and I love helping people heal and transform their relationships with money. Not just because I think we could all use some help in that area. We've grown up with some pretty twisted, unhelpful conditioning. So not just like becoming more organized financially and getting our mindsets in order, but really when we do money mindset healing, it's like a portal to all of our other stuff too. It's like a portal to our childhood trauma. I mean, it's really incredible work. So I love that stuff. And Making You Magnetic is around helping you step into that version of yourself, like we talked about, the future version, but especially embodying the wealthy future version of ourselves, and like how to be more magnetic, not just, in our professional lives, but in our personal lives, which so changes how we feel on the inside, but also how we're perceived on the outside. So that's one thing. And then all my other stuff, I'm very easy to find. I'm the only one of me. So I'm at Sandra Possing on all social medias. I'm sandrapossing.com, my website. You could just also Google my name and click on any of the first links that come up, and it'll probably be me.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And of course, I want to give a big thank you to everybody who's going to be tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a detailed review, and just check us out on Instagram at Everyday Elevations for some exclusive content, the latest updates, and we provide some behind the scenes sneak peeks too as well. So you get to kind of follow along with my journey. And with that, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.